Sierra, say again, KIA.
I got 2 KIAs, I'm up.
Time spent in preparation is always time well spent, often lives well saved, sometimes even the difference between success and failure. With so many individual tasks to be coordinated and synchronized, the action on the objective must be rehearsed in every detail and every man briefed individually.
How to fight in the dark. This video is going to go over everything that you need to know to be effective to fight when the sun goes down. Now, all of these skills in this video are absolutely crucial on an individual level, and if anyone in your team is lacking these skills, it's going to show. Because if one person compromises the entire team at night, it could deem your entire team or unit unable to operate. So whether it's doing a raid or just simply standing guard and sentry, you have to understand these on an individual level. Now, with nighttime being more than half the day in some places around the world, up to 12 hours, learning how to fight at night is absolutely crucial if we want to operate around the clock. With that, the commonality of night vision devices and thermal to those who have access to them or can afford them mean that many people think that if you have those devices, or because of their commonality, that these basic night fighting skills are of no use. Well, I'm here to tell you the complete opposite, because if you don't understand the basics that we're going to cover in this video, then those tools are going to be useless to you if you have them. But if you don't understand the basics, you're not going to understand how to counter them. So with that, let's go into the daytime so we can demonstrate some skills, get out of some of this gear, and understand how to fight at night. So let's first start off by talking about the weather and the environment. Because if we can understand that, then we can fully understand all the things that we have to know about fighting at night. That means understanding ourselves and the challenges that this environment poses. Now, like everything on this channel, it might seem like common sense and you might assume that you know, but I assure you, we're going to cover things that no one seems to be talking about. Now, depending on where you are in the world exactly, nighttime can be up to 12 hours, and we said that in the introduction. But if you're more north, nighttime could be not at all or the entire day. So depending where you are in the world, operating at night, again, is absolutely crucial. Now first, let's understand how long nighttime is. Depending on where you are in the world and the season, it could be a full 24 hours, 12 hours, or 6 hours. If you're as far north, then even during the summertime, you may not have a nighttime at all. But here in North America, our longest nights are going to be anywhere from 8 to 12 hours. So that's going to be half the day. So if you don't know how to fight at night, then you're missing out on either half the day to get something done, or you're making yourself vulnerable for half the day. Now, coming on from this is going to be lighting conditions. Understand that nighttime during different seasons is almost going to feel different. During the summertime, nighttimes often contain a lot of dew and moisture. This is going to mean that optics are going to fog up, and it can actually play tricks on our optical sensors such as thermal and night vision devices. Whereas during the wintertime, the crisp, cool air, the lack of canopy is going to mean that things such as moonlight and starlight are going to appear brighter. The lack of a canopy with trees is going to mean that more light is going to reach you on the ground. Add to this the fact that snow also reflects light, and winter nights are going to seem a lot brighter. Adding to this is going to be the cool, dense air is actually going to help sensors work. So thermal detectors are either going to work in your advantage or your disadvantage if you don't have them and you have to hide from them. These are things that you should consider when operating and at least be aware of. The season has a lot to do with the type of nighttime you're going to experience. Building off of lighting conditions is of course going to be moonlight. Now those of you that own and operate night vision are very keen about the moon, but let's go over it quickly here so you can understand some basic things. First of all, a moon phase typically takes 1 month. So the patterns are going to repeat throughout the different months. Combine that with our seasonal changes and you can really understand the type of nights that you're going to have during that part of the year. So what is a moon phase? Simply put, the Earth casts a shadow on the moon, and you have a full moon which is going to reflect more light from the sun, giving you a lighter nighttime. Why is this important? Well, more moon means better night vision for us naturally, and it also means that it allows our night vision devices to take that ambient light, amplify it, and work more effectively. So, how do we determine this? Well, simply put, a moon phase takes about 1 month. Within this month, between the first 3 and 4 days, the moon is going to be at its brightest, and the last 5 to 7 days of the month. Now, the middle portion of the month is when the moon is going to be waxing and waning, or there's going to be no moon at all. So if you're reliant on moonlight, either because night vision devices or whatever it might be, your best time to operate is going to be at the beginning of the month or the end. And if you want to add one more to that, that's going to be during the winter time. Those are the best time to perform night operations in the Northern Hemisphere. Moving on from our environmental conditions, there's going to be something that nobody seems to be talking about, and that's going to be the psychological effect of nighttime. Now, we are all aware that kids are scared of the dark, but I would bet to say that we're all scared of the dark. Why do I say that? It is innate inside us. In fact, if you do not have a fear of the dark or the unknown, to some level, your hardwiring is almost kind of wrong. Because inside us all as humans, we have these innate survival natures and tendencies. And one of those things is going to be the fear of the unknown and the fear of the dark. This is why we sleep during the night. It's why we rest. It's why we don't want to go out and adventure. But the skills that we're learning today are going to mean that we're going to have to do that. Now, because this is inside us all and it's part of our psychology, the better you can understand these principles that we're going to talk about, the better you can understand yourself, which means you can overcome them. You can understand the mindset of your teammates, and you can get inside the head of the enemy that may be, and you're hoping will be less trained and more vulnerable to these psychological conditions. So what are some of the natural psychological reactions that we have as humans when the sun goes down, we're alone in the dark, be it in the woods or in an urban area? Well, to start with, those are going to be about 4 things. The first one is going to be increase in mood swings. This means that we are more likely to experience wider ranges of emotions during that time. So if you're scared, you're going to feel more scared. If you're feeling vulnerable or worrying, you're going to feel those emotions more. And that isn't helped by our second thing, which is an increased anxiety. What this means is that you're going to start feeling more anxious about everything. And that leads into the third thing, which is going to be increased sensitivity and impulsivity to our environment. So we're more anxious, we're more sensitive to everything around us. If you've ever been home alone, you've heard a bang and you kind of stop and you start to think about it, that's exactly what we're talking about here. So when you combine all of these psychological effects and really start to dig deep and understand them, understand what exactly is it at night that makes you scared, anxious, nervous, hyperreactive, or sensitive. Do that, be really honest with yourself, and it's going to allow you to better cope in the night and deal with those things. Because when you're patrolling at night, you got a full squad of fully armed guys, but if you see a shadow of what maybe looks like a human or not, because our brain does that, and you add, a child laughing and you see a teddy bear in the middle of the road, I don't care how hardcore you are, you're all going to start thinking of scenarios in your head. So the better that we can understand our psychology as humans, we can get ahead of that and we can operate, we can mitigate our tendencies to overreact and inherently become more effective with ourselves and within our teams. One last note when it comes to the psychology of night fighting is going to be the human tendency to relate objects to a human. What this simply means is that we like to see the shapes of faces and people in objects when they might not be there. The reason we do this is our brain wants to make sense of our environment, and the easiest way to make sense of something is to use the human face, because the human brain can read a human face with thousands of inputs very easily. So if we see something confusing, we automatically try to make it the most familiar thing, which is a human body or a human face. This is why you're walking in the woods and we think that trees look like humans, or we see faces in objects where there might not be none. Oftentimes, a lot of paranormal activity that's reported is actually just a case of this psychological phenomenon. But again, be aware of it, because if you're patrolling in an enemy environment, you're looking for the enemy, and your teammate sees something that looks like a human, you've got anxiety, you've got the hypersensitivity, that could very easily lead to a team member calling a contact and engaging. So again, sit down with your team, sit down with yourself, understand these psychological phenomena that happen with us, and talk about how you're going to deal with them as a team, because they do happen and they are even more pronounced during the night. So now that we've spoken about psychological effects on the body, let's talk a little bit about the physical effects. Now, nighttime brings a plethora of challenges when it comes to the effect on our body, least of which are going to be the effect in our senses, our tiredness, and our hunger. Let's start with the most obvious, which is going to be our tiredness. Now, naturally, our circadian rhythm wants us up during the day, taking a few naps, and then predominantly sleeping at night. There's an often saying that people are night owls, and that has actually been scientifically proven. Because we lived in tribes, some of us were meant to stay up at night and protect, while most of us were meant to go outside, venture. So you are going to have people within your team that are more suited to being up at night. So if you've got a large selection of individuals and a night mission has to be done, maybe selecting those night owls are going to be the best option. But if that's not the best option, the second thing you can do is simply rest during the day so you're more awake at night. Now, in our nutrition video, we talked about the use of caffeine. I'm not a fan of artificial drugs or caffeine during night operations, because what it means is it's going to cause a crash, and the long-term recovery is going to be a lot longer. Especially if you're doing prolonged missions, you're going to want to get into more of a natural rhythm of nighttime operations, opposed to just jacking yourself full of stimulants every nighttime that you have to do something. So, with that said, let's talk about the effect that night has on our senses, and this gets really interesting. So when it comes to our physical senses during the night, there's a common saying that your senses are increased during nighttime, and this to an extent is true. But what's really happening is, because our brains take in an enormous amount of data with our eyesight, because we don't have as much eyesight, our brains have a capacity that has basically been taken away, so it's going to rely on getting data from those other senses. We're talking about our touch, our smell, and our hearing. Yes, we still have eyesight, but because we don't have the amount of data coming in, our brains are going to rely more on those other senses. This is going to cause a sort of hypersensitivity. Now, when paired with our psychological hypersensitivity, our anxiety, our increased stimulus, this can be negative and positive at the same time. So let's talk a little bit about it. To start off, I first want to talk about your hearing. There is a myth that sound travels further at night. This is not true whatsoever. What's happening is our brains are taking in more data from our ears. Therefore, we acquire more of a hypersensitivity to the sounds around us. Sound does not magically get louder. There's no volume. The air density doesn't really change that much. Your environment doesn't really change that much. Sound does not travel further or louder at night. It's a complete myth. All that happens is we become more sensitive to the sounds around us because we don't have the eyesight which our brain would traditionally rely on. Moving on from this is going to be our touch and our feel. If you've ever gotten up from the bathroom in a dark room and you've stumbled around looking for stuff, this is exactly what we're talking about. Because our brains can't see, there's usually no sounds going on, we stumble around and we walk very slowly, and we're looking to touch things because, again, we don't have that visual information. Our body is trying to get it physically. So at nighttime, you're going to find that you're going to be touching a lot more stuff, again, to supplement that lack of eyesight, that lack of data that your brain is getting. Next is going to be our smell. Now, smell is one that us as humans don't really have, but at nighttime, just like our other senses, it's going to become more sensitive. So you might find that you're picking up more smells such as grass, dew, or wetness during the summertime. And during the winter time, because the air is very crisp, you're going to pick up more on things maybe such as campfires and things of that nature. Now, when it comes to hearing, one thing that we can do is we can actually make our skull almost like a speaker or an echo chamber. How do we do this? Well, very simply, you're going to take off any hats or wear of that nature. You're going to cup your ear in the direction that you might hear something, and you're going to open your mouth. Yeah, and right there I could already hear something that I couldn't hear before. Not me just talking, but what this is doing is it's creating an echo chamber around your eardrum, the cavity of your mouth, and it's going to allow you to hear a lot better. That, combined with the increased sensitivity at nighttime, is a great tool if you're conducting sales. Stop, look, listen, smell. Next is going to be probably the most important and most hindered. This is going to be our eyesight. Now, the human eye is very good during the daytime. It's relatively good, we can see far, we can pick up movement, and the attraction of the human eyeball to movement is what makes us really good hunters. But at nighttime, this is taken away. So what do our bodies do? Well, at night, our retinas, which is the black portion of your eye, expands to let in more light. We also have rods and cones. What happens is at nighttime, our rods are destroyed and our cones start to build up in our eyeball. Now, our cones are very, very sensitive to small amounts of light. And just like night vision, our eye, like a camera lens, tries to open up to allow as much light in to get as much data as possible. The downside to this is, unlike night vision or a camera lens, it takes time. In fact, it can take up to 30 minutes for our eyes to fully adjust to the nighttime. The other downside is if we shine light into our eyes, our natural cones are actually going to get destroyed and they need to regenerate, which again can take up to half an hour. So if you're adjusted to the nighttime and someone shines a light in your eye, it's going to take another 30 minutes for you to get adjusted. Keep this in mind when it comes to things like flares, passing cars, or even just utilizing light. Very early on, I was taught that when you're patrolling and you see a light, you always close your shooting eye. And this is a technique that I use today. As a matter of fact, next time you get up for the bathroom, I want you guys to close your right eye, turn on the light, look around, turn your light off, and then open your eye. And what you see is pitch black out of your non-shooting eye, and you see a clear room out of your right eye. It's pretty incredible, and it's a very simple technique that means that in the field, your eyesight won't be compromised. Another technique that you can use when it comes to preserving your night vision at night is going to be drinking a lot of water. Our eyes are predominantly made of liquid, and by having a surplus of water, ensuring that you're not dehydrated is going to mean that your eyes can work the best that they can. Another technique you can do while observing something is, because our eyeball retina expands, the center of the eye, where the rods are not in use. It's the cones around the perimeter that are in use. So what this means is, if you're looking at something at night, you should look off to the side and then look back. So if you want to observe something, a scanning technique or looking around an object that you suspect is going to be the best way to do that. So there are the psychological, environmental, and physical factors that nighttime has on our bodies. So with that, let's talk about the actual equipment and techniques that we need to consider when operating at night. When it comes to you and your equipment fighting at night, there's going to be a few changes that we want to make to our SOPs when doing this. So let's talk about, first of all, yourself and your personal gear. First of all, your standard camouflage principles still apply. Although there is a limit of light, we're still going to want to break up our outline, our 5 S's of camouflage, because we might be fighting a force that has night vision and thermal. So we still want to take care when actually applying our camouflage. This also includes our skin. Using things such as gloves are going to be important, and camouflage paint. The reason is that our oily skin can reflect moonlight, so we're more likely to see the shining effect of that. Moving on from that is going to be sound. Now that we discussed why sound is so big and how our senses rely on it more, so we're going to want to make sure that we tape up any loose, dangly, flapping parts, slings, anything that might make sound. A big one is going to be our water bottles. The water sloshing around is going to make a lot of noise, so make sure that when you step off, your water is topped off and anything that might make sound is mitigated and dealt with. Next, when it comes to our personal equipment, is going to be uniformity. If you're working in a team, you want to make sure that everyone has kit located in a similar, if not the same place. The reason for this is when you have to access it, people need to know where everything is. This means that when you're packing and unpacking your equipment also, you should know where everything is. So one thing that I like to do is I unpack and repack my equipment multiple times. This ensures that I know where everything is and how to access it and put it away. Another technique we can use when it comes to our gear is we can pack it in the order that we'll need it. So if we're going on an operation at nighttime, we're going to pack things such as food, water, ammunition, observation devices first, our sleeping gear and things of that nature second. With this, organizing our gear is also going to be really important to keeping it staged. What staged means is things such as bashers or water purification items are basically configured in the manner that we'll need them. So if we need to put out a tarp at night, our lines and everything, just like during the day, are going to be pre-staged. Lines are going to be attached, knots are going to be pre-tied. We're going to basically make it as ready as possible because at nighttime we don't want to be fiddling around. Something else we need to do with our personal equipment is make sure that everything is attached to us. What this means is we want to use lines and paracord to physically attach our equipment. Little items such as gloves, compasses, items, notepads that we're oftentimes taking in and out of our pockets, even night vision and thermal devices have to physically be tethered to us. If not, we can risk losing them, and that's going to be a really, really bad day. So make sure that you tether those small individual items physically to your body. Bit of personal gear that you're going to need during the nighttime is actually going to be eye protection. So things such as twigs, branches, stuff that we're walking through, we're not going to see at night. So whether under night vision or not, even if you have them on, you're going to want eye protection, because the last thing you want is someone taking a twig to the eye. This is something that I personally have seen very often in the field, and I always do my best to wear eye protection. Now, I understand that during the summertime this could be awkward, so make sure that if you do have eye protection, you bring defogging equipment. But if you have night vision or thermal optics, you should have the defogging equipment anyway. I find keeping a rag in my pocket is also useful for this, as you can just wipe lenses as needed. Now let's talk about light discipline. So at nighttime, we're going to want to use our lights. It's going to be very tempting to not want to take your time and use that white light or that red light. So when it comes to nighttime, we want to make sure that we're using light in the correct ways. The first thing is always assume that somebody can see you. So really ask yourself, do I need to be using a light right now? This is why training with your equipment, knowing where everything is staged with your eyes closed at night is going to be so crucial, because the better you can do that, the less white light you'll actually need. Now, if we do have to use lights, there's really two options, well, three. First one is going to be our traditional white light. This is going to be the least desirable, but if you have to use it, I find putting tape over a lens, poking a pinhole in it, or even no hole at all, will dim the light enough that it at least gives you a very small amount. Next is going to be our red light. Now, red light is really commonly used at nighttime for military operations. The reason is it doesn't damage our cones, so it maintains our natural night vision, and it's also very hard to see from a distance. So if you have to use red light, use something like a poncho or keep it to an absolute minimum. The last type of light is going to be IR light. Now, if you have night vision devices, then it's going to be really tempting to use IR beams, lasers to light things up. But I really ask you not to do that. The proliferation of night vision and thermal devices means that it's really common that the enemy is going to have night vision, and even if they don't, you can use an iPhone or a simple Nokia camera to detect IR light. So IR light is basically a white light, if not brighter, to night vision devices and even camera phones. Especially in the age of drones, you want to be really careful when using your IR light, so assume that the enemy can see everything. Red light when you need to is probably the safest option, as IR light is often very, very bright and very obvious to those devices that can detect it, and white light is just as obvious as IR light to the human eyeball. Another consideration when it comes to our equipment and light is going to be things such as watches and phones. Oftentimes these devices have either IR lights or very, very small lights that can be seen under night vision or become very obvious at night time. So if you're using GPSs or any sort of electronic device, be very aware of what it can put off. Our optics, like red dots, actually have a small red light inside them, and this can actually be seen if you lack something like a kill flash. So again, just be aware of it, look over your equipment, have your buddy look over your equipment, get out, train, and look at this stuff in person with your teammates. So now that we understand lighting, let's understand being seen and seeing ourselves. The biggest thing at nighttime is going to obviously be the moonlight. Now the moon can work in our advantage or disadvantage. The thing about the moon is that if we have the moon shining on us, the side where the moon is shining, our natural camouflage, our blending in is going to work fantastically. But if our enemy can see our shadowed side, it actually makes the human body and objects look completely darked out. This is because of a shadow that it casts upon itself. So if you can, make sure that your camouflage side is where the moon is coming from. I understand you don't have control over that all the time, but it's something to just understand and consider. The other thing when it comes to being seen at night is the use of IR or reflective patches. I'm a big fan of having cat's eyes on the back of my helmet. They're very, very dim, and more than a few times, they have really saved my friend's life from either being injured or honestly, in some of the situations, outright killed. The ability to see where I was, they did not have night vision, really helped them because we couldn't see our hands in front of our faces. Even with the night vision, we could hardly see anything. So using items such as cat's eyes while on patrol can be very, very useful. IR patches are great, they reflect IR light, but again, if the enemy has night vision, if your opponent has night vision, you're going to want to be aware of that. Honestly, SOP now is, unless you're in an urban environment on a quick raid, just take the IR patches off. Other things that can help being seen is using chem lights, so we can use chem lights of different colors to indicate different things. We can also use lights to signal a simple flash system, so 5 flashes. One person flashes twice, the other person flashes twice, and maybe a 1 flash response. Some sort of code method of that nature. That can be done with either IR light or visible light, depending on what your teammates have. But developing those SOPs so you can be seen or not be seen during the night are going to be really important and crucial if you want to remain safe and make sure that you're meeting or seeing the right people. Next up is going to be our weapon system. So our weapon system is what everyone loves to talk about. So let's talk about some considerations when it comes to night fighting and your firearm. The first thing is going to be know your firearm really well. Just like our equipment, we should know where every single control on this rifle is, what it does, and we should be able to fully operate it. That means reloads, that means manipulation with our sling very, very comfortably, whether we can see or not. So again, take time to actually practice this. Most important thing when it comes to our rifle at nighttime is going to be aiming and our optics. Now, if we have iron sights oftentimes, especially the M16 models, have 2 basically peepholes in the sights. The first one is very small, this is your precision or your day sight, and the next one is very big, and that's to allow more light in, and this is often known as a night sight or a battle sight. So if you've got iron sights, you're going to want to flip it to your nighttime sight or the bigger hole in that iron sight. Next up is going to be our optics. Now at night, etched reticles, LPVOs are very common. I'm a big fan of the ACOG, and one of the reasons why is because it has tritium. Now tritium is a radioactive substance that glows in the night. That means that with no batteries, this sight will always have a glowing reticle. But if you have a sight that takes batteries, if you do not have a kill flash device like on this firearm, then you can actually see that red dot at night through the optic. Might not be obvious, honestly, you'll probably have to be close enough for somebody to see it that they're too close for comfort anyway, but just something to consider. The other thing is getting used to using your optics at night. If you don't have night vision, then really get used to passively aiming. Again, a reticle like an ACOG that gives you a wide field of view is going to let in more light, so you don't really need that need for night vision. The use of the red dot, however, is going to be very useful if you do have night vision, and that's going to be because of passive aiming. I really don't suggest the use of IR lasers in today's environment. Again, unless it's a quick urban raid where you have superiority of the battlefield, you're not going to want to use IR lasers. All they do is give you a position away. So make sure that you're constantly training passive aiming. I really do suggest that if you guys have access to it, go out with no night vision, engage and shoot targets on the range using just your natural eyes and your natural sighting systems on your rifle. You'll actually find that it's not as bad as you think. So whatever system you've got, make sure that you're training with it. Make sure that you're really training passive shooting. Shooting with lasers is cool, it's fun, but if you're in a near-peer situation, it's not the reality. I personally prefer and am better with shooting passive with this rifle than with any sort of laser device. Coming on from our weapon system is going to be patrolling. So when we patrol at night, all of our patrolling principles remain the same, but we want to make sure that we're doing a few things differently. What are those things? Well, first thing is going to be, we're going to go a lot slower, because at night time we have, again, reduced senses, and we're going to want to make sure that we're just slowing down, okay? There is no rush. Take your time. The next thing is going to be our spacing. So we want to make sure that our spacing is a lot closer at night time. Again, if you've got cat's eyes on the back of your helmets or your headwear, then make sure that your friends can see that. Take your time. It's really difficult to be quiet at night. So one of the techniques we can use is called the ghost walk. And all the ghost walk basically is we're taking a step with our heel first, the side of our foot, and then the main foot. And what this means is we can get a very quiet stepping technique. In conjunction to this, we also do a sweep. So a sweeping for anything, sweeping, nice and slow. And that's a really good technique to walking at night, quietly, keeping your head up, and again, making sure that you can see everything in front of you. Some other notes about patrolling is going to be pre-planning the route. Some other notes to patrolling is going to be pre-planning the route as best as you can. I know you can't always do this, but if you can pre-plan a route that you know that you and your men can negotiate at night. With that said, oftentimes the safest route is the hardest, so it's a balancing act between what you want to do. But make sure that your men are capable. If only half of your men are equipped with night vision, maybe taking a route that requires night vision in dense forest isn't the best. And if you are going, make sure, again, you've all got iPro, you're all trained, you all know what to do. Not ladling up your men with equipment, be as lightweight as possible. Patrolling at night in heavy forest, swamp with bergens is just asking for trouble and an injury casualty. So as a leader, or even just as an individual or a small team, really consider and think about these things when you're patrolling at night. Again, I really suggest that you guys get out and train, get out in your gear, even mild gear, go into pitch black forest and see how much you can patrol and get done. Very quickly, you'll realize if you're not taking sticks to the eyes, you're not covering a lot of ground. So when you're planning those patrols, be realistic about the time and distance that it's going to take to cover that effectively. Again, guys, the point of a patrol, the point of movement is you have to be ready to engage in combat when you get there. You can't be tired, you can't be exhausted. This, for some reason, is something that a lot of people seem to forget, especially when it comes to the rucking or the moving. And I see this all the time at Milsim games, is that people exhaust themselves, so by the time they get there, they can't think straight, they're tired, they're out of breath, they're exhausted. You're meant to be there ready to fight, so work on your fitness and understand what your team is capable of, what their fitness levels are, and what their training level is, because just like everything on this channel, it all comes together. All right, enough of the digression, let's get back to nighttime. So let's talk about night vision and thermal. Now this is the trump card, the game changer when it comes to nighttime fighting. But again, if you don't have it, don't feel that you're completely left out. Thermal devices are fantastic for observation. We did a thermal video on that. We're going to film another one this winter so you guys can see summer and winter. But go watch the thermal video if you're interested in thermal. Just know that if you perfect all the basic soldiering techniques with a little slight tweaks, thermal, if you've got it, if the enemy got it, is something that we've got to deal with. At the end of the day, they still need to bring either fire down upon you or they need to close with and destroy you. So depending on how you see it, that can be good or bad. But if you perfect your basic soldiering skills, thermal, again, if you've got it or if you're aware of it, I don't really think it makes a difference. I think it's just another level of the battlefield that we have to consider. Now, where I do see it cause trouble is when people assume that either the enemy doesn't have it or they get lazy. That's really where I see thermal really having effect. For example, I see a lot of times like groups of people, they'll look through thermal, the enemy, and they'll sneak up on them. Well, that's because they have bad security. Even if they didn't have thermal, if they kept their bloody eye out with optical devices, you can see someone. So don't get lazy if you suspect that those sensors are hunting you. Let's talk about night vision. So we did a night vision basics video, an introduction. We're going to do a video on how to use night vision and how to actually fight with night vision, simply because it's such a huge topic. But just know, like anything, if you have night vision, be competent in its use. If you've got sentries, give it to the sentries. If you've got guys on the machine guns, give it to the machine guns. If you've got leaders, give it to the leaders. If you have limited night vision, prioritize who are going to use that unit. I know that some people might have it, they might be the least trained. Guys, if you have it and you're the least trained, give it to somebody who's highly trained, because the effectiveness of that unit is going to really determine on the implementation and effective use of that device. But again, if you do not have those sensors, train the basics, because I'd much rather take someone who's a very well trained soldier and just doesn't happen to have those devices than someone who has zero training but spent the money with the credit card and got those devices, guys. The next thing that I want to talk about is going to be drones and air assets. Now, drones are changing the face of the battlefield, and again, like our thermal and night vision sensors, are oftentimes seen as a game changer if you don't have them, or a death sentence if you don't have access to them. Yes, they are great, but they are limited. Main limitations are going to be the weather and the range. Honestly, if you're being hunted by a drone, it means you're pretty close to the enemy, because those things don't have very far range. Especially with the advent of hacking, a lot of drone operators are actually tethering these to a physical wire, so the distance could be less than 1 kilometer that you are from the enemy. But besides the point, let's talk about how a drone can hunt you at night. Well, they can be equipped with either night vision or thermal sensors, in which case, again, your camouflage principles simply apply. Good soldiering skills are what's going to matter in these situations. But if you're getting hunted by a drone, one thing that a lot of drone operators don't seem to realize from a lot of the footage I'm seeing is they've got IR, or indication lights, for red and green is for indication. So red is right side is red, green is your left side, and that's to tell the position of a drone. Or they've got an IR light. So if the drone operator is inexperienced, you can actually look skyward with your night vision device and see a blinking IR light. It's not fail-proof, but just be aware that if you do suspect drones, look skyward, look for those IR lights. Drone motors also give off a huge amount of thermal energy, so you'll probably be able to see a drone through thermal depending on the sensitivity of your handheld monocular device. But just understand that if you are getting hunted from them or hunted by drones, that you should be looking out for them and you should be aware of them. Again, using that top cover, using your camouflage, your soldiering skills is going to be absolutely crucial. And if you do have a drone, if you have access to them, using them at night to scout ahead isn't a bad idea. Moving on from drones, let's talk about our shelters. So camps and shelters at night. Oftentimes we want to rest up, we want to wash up, we want to cook, we want to start a fire, sing and talk about the day. But if we're in a tactical environment, especially at night, as hard as it's going to be, as cold as it's going to be, we can't start a fire, we can't get cooking. Things like flameless heaters are fine, but if you're going to do that, make sure that you're utilizing a lot of overhead cover. Your bashes, your tarps, chop down trees. We talk about standoff distance in the thermal video. That's still going to apply here. So if you're at night and you're camping down, make sure that you're taking the right precautions to make sure that your unit is as little detection as possible from drones and thermal assets of that nature. Again, when it comes to sentry duty, make sure that at night you're giving night vision to those guys. If you're in an environment that's a bit safer, then if we're setting up lines or tarps, I like to hang a chem light over those lines, and that just stops people from tripping over them at night time and the whole bloody shelter coming down at night, which I assure you is not fun. So just like everything, if you're at camp, make sure that you're doing things slowly. Only take out from your pack what you actually need when you're doing personal admin. Don't have everything spread out all over the place. Keep your weapon close, know where everything is, and again, take your time, take it slow, and don't lose anything. So then lastly is going to be our vehicles. When it comes to vehicles at night, the same principles apply. But vehicles give off a lot of light, they give off a lot of heat, they create a lot of noise. So make sure that you're covering up those lights. You're either disconnecting the circuit breakers. Inside the cab, there are tons of just these IR little lights and flashing things inside the vehicle. So if you got the tech, look at the vehicle under night vision, make sure that you're mitigating all of those light sources. Drive as slow as you can, again, pre-planned routes, things of that nature. If you're going to use a vehicle at night, it should really be equipped to do so. In an urban environment, make sure that it's really designed to do so. Otherwise, a vehicle can be a complete liability when trying to operate at night, unless, again, it's been really designed and built to do that job. Lastly, guys, I want to talk about knowing when to quit. So night operations, oftentimes they have so many challenges that it's going to get to a point where the operation can't be done. You should turn back, or you should just stop what you're doing. Do not be scared to do that. The safety of yourself and your men oftentimes is more important than the mission. So if there's a night where it might work out better, if there's options to not do something, or if stuff has become so compromised and dangerous, take a step back, have a go at it another night. It's a lot easier to get halfway, realize this route isn't good, the enemy not detect you, and come back, than spend the whole night trying to get to it and now you're 3 hours behind schedule. Just again, like all of our videos here, it's more stuff to consider. So you have it. There's an introduction to night fighting. I hope that this exercise in not only mental but tips and tricks also gave you a lot to think about. Guys, get out there and train these skills. Nighttime, I did a poll on my Instagram, echomike_training, and a lot of you was basically saying that you were training one day a month or less throughout the entire year at nighttime. And considering nighttime is about half the day, we need to get out there and start training night as a community. Because if we can master the night, it's going to give you a massive advantage. I hope, like all of our videos, that gave you some skills and things to think about when it comes to fighting at night. It's hugely important, and I really suggest that you guys go out and do it. I recently did a poll on my Instagram, echomike_training, about asking you guys, how often do you actually train night fighting? And a majority of you answered that you train one day or less throughout the entire year. Guys, nighttime is half the day. So we've got to get that out there and train as a community these skills, because they are absolutely crucial. And if you master them and own the night, it's going to really show in your effectiveness as an individual and a team. Guys, I want to thank you so much for all the support. The channel's growing and it's been phenomenal seeing the comments, the likes and the shares. So let's continue to grow this community and show it to people that need to see it. As you guys know, we have a new community logo. This community is for you guys, not for me. So enjoy it. There's going to be patches, there's going to be merch coming, so we can really spread all the training and what this channel stands for, which is those infantry skills, the philosophy, putting morality behind these dangerous skills and becoming capable men and women in the modern world. Guys, as always, look after your mates, look after each other, and I'll see you on the next one.